for those, I see a few people have built it in over the past minute or two. But briefly, your presenters today will be Jared Inserra from Arctic Wolf, account representative, security engineer, and Braxton Moulton, who is NetGain's technical director of security. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Jared.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, and everyone who's joined today. Thank you so much for your time. And we're going to be talking about, why you need a culture of cybersecurity and why that's going to be really important here. And we'll discuss that over the following 30 to 45 minutes here. So really to kick things off and really talk about, cybersecurity in general. When we talk about that, the goal for every organization is obviously we want to end your overall cyber risk. And as this can be a very tall task to tackle, cyber criminals have continued to adapt and find new and creative ways to launch cyber attacks. And we'll definitely dive a little bit deeper into this as we go on through the presentation. But in 2020, there was a study done by IDG Security Priorities that 87% of security leaders believe that their organization was falling short when addressing their cyber risk. So what we'll discuss a little further today is just the overall effectiveness problem that cybersecurity has and why it's really important as you as business leaders should adopt a culture of cybersecurity within your organization. So when we talk about ending cyber risk and really the goal and something that NetGain and Arctic Wolf do really well together is really tackling the task at hand. So when we talk about your total risk as an organization, in today's day and age, most, if not all, organizations have faced some sort of challenges around cybersecurity or have had some sort of cybersecurity attack. And the way they've really tried to solve those problems has been to purchase tools and technology. So while those two things are really crucial and necessary to have as an organization, those alone are not going to be enough to solve the challenges organizations are facing today. So with purpose-built technology, that must be paired with extraordinary talent. The way we drive effective outcomes from cybersecurity tools today is really through the people component of cybersecurity. And between the combination of these two things together, it's going to provide you with the best possible way of really mitigating your risk and reducing what we call the likelihood and impact of an incident happening. So having a fully operationalized security solution will get you pretty far, and we believe that it's going to get you about 98% of the way there. But what do you do with the other 2% of that risk that we talk about at the bottom here? And the answer is through either a combination of having a warranty through a solutions provider that you have today, or something along the lines of cyber insurance with which most, if not all, organizations have or are trying to obtain. And this is a really crucial part of the fact of ending or addressing your total risk as an organization. And what we'll talk about today is just the holistic approach that combines risk mitigation and risk transfer, and how Arctic Wolf and NetGain partner together to really end cyber risk for our customers. And this just kind of starts and begins with expanding visibility and coverage. Where a lot of organizations have started today is looking at your attack surface and understanding where you are exposed to a lot of these cyber criminals today. And so when we look at things like devices, endpoints, laptops, desktops, and servers for your organization, every organization has some sort of infrastructure that they've started with. But really, I want to jump back a couple of years here to the beginning of COVID, where we really saw an expanded attack surface being opened up to a lot of cyber criminals. And so when we look at this, a majority of organizations had more of a traditional approach when it came to security, really holding things and hosting things on premise, but then had to really quickly adapt to a work from home model where organizations were forced to learn on the go due to the pandemic. This had opened up a whole new attack surface to organizations for cyber criminals to start leveraging new attacks, with this cloud component being a new attack surface for organizations to really learn and adapt to and really learn how to protect themselves from these outside threats. And when we talk about this cloud component, it's much harder for organizations to protect their employees when they are working from home and not traditionally in that office space where everyone has that culture of being together. What we'll talk about here as well is that, with the large work from home force, it became much harder to really protect their employees from threats to come, as cyber criminals learned that all it took was for one person to click a link or access a PDF or an attachment in an email to gain their credentials, and cyber attacks became much more autonomous and much more persistent due to this new attack surface being opened up. And so this has really led us to believe that, small businesses have become a much larger target than most of your traditional enterprise organizations. And so when we're talking about this, I want to have Braxton share an example here, but why small businesses are becoming a much larger target to a lot of these, cyber attacks today, and I'll let him kind of speak to this for a moment here.
Well, thanks, Jared. So in my role here at NetGain, I operate as the virtual chief security officer for a lot of our clients, helping them to improve their cybersecurity posture, and it's primarily for small to medium-sized businesses. So I've heard a lot and I've seen a lot in regards to attacks and even justifications behind, why are we not, putting a proper budget towards security controls. And a couple of the things that I've seen has been like a wire transfer fraud. So what will happen is a user's account or their email account will get compromised because maybe that end user isn't being cautious about where they're storing their credentials. That organization doesn't have, controls in place to protect the authentication of that account. That organization doesn't have properly developed processes with operations in regards to wire transfer fraud. So what will happen is, that account will get compromised, and then that attacker will jump into an email thread and will push forward, a request or an approval for a wire transfer to happen. And then it's a combination of all of these things that are, underdeveloped, essentially technical controls, operational controls that will, that allows that illicit transfer of funds. So I've heard, we're too small, people don't care about us. That couldn't be further from the truth. That justification doesn't work because that's exactly what, the attackers and these hackers are wanting you to think. You are naturally, because you are a smaller organization compared to like, a full-blown enterprise, you're going to have controls that aren't quite as robust. You're going to have a budget that's not quite as full. You're going to be, you're not going to be as full in terms of employment and personnel that you might have, and operationally you may not be, fully baked. So they're counting on you to not have mature enough controls that's going to make their lives easier and is ultimately going to impact your business, right? So additionally, you could be used as a stepping stone to a bigger fish. So, if they are able to breach into your environment, you typically, if you're relying on like a vendor for a service or an application, you've probably got hooks into their environment, or they've got hooks into you to some degree. So they could, they could leverage that relationship to maybe get to them, or the inverse of that, you may not even be attacked directly. The hacker could attack your vendor and then take them down, and now you you don't have access to that service or that application for whatever given period of time. So now you have to make sure you have controls in place in preparation of that. So it's not just technical controls or operational controls. Now you have to have recovery controls and things of this nature. So you're not, it's probably like a myth, like you're too big to fail, but you're also, there's no such thing as being, too small for them to not care.
Absolutely. And when we talk about, small businesses becoming a larger target for cyber criminals, there's really 2 points of emphasis on, how we're addressing, cyber risk and these attacks in general. And it's kind of an equation that we've built out, but the first is, what is the likelihood of an incident happening? But the second part of that is, what is the impact going to be? a lot of times if organizations go through some sort of incident, whether that's around business email compromise, ransomware, malware, some of the biggest factors can be obviously the financial impact to an organization, but also, what is the downtime going to be, especially for small businesses? If you're down for a week, a month, or even multiple months at a time, the damage itself could put you out of business, but also, it's a reputation damage as well. So understanding that, if you're someone that is fearful of having some sort of attack, we want to really limit the likelihood of an incident happening, but also limit the impact of that incident. Time is of the essence when we talk about, identifying and being able to detect and respond to, indicators of compromise, to make sure that we're preventing these attacks from happening in the first place. If we look back on, the recent past of some of the high-profile vulnerabilities, we see things like Log4j, Spring4Shell, SolarWinds, the Uber incident that happened late last year. But really, the goal here is it's no longer a matter of if, it's a matter of when something happens. And the question relies on, how prepared will you be when that happens? So this really goes back and jumping back to, having the right technology in place today to really make sure that, things are buttoned up, but also having the people behind your technology to really deliver the outcomes you desire from a cybersecurity perspective. And so by having the right technology and the right people behind your cybersecurity practice, you're going to be able to reduce that likelihood and the impact of an incident occurring in your organization. Like I said, in cybersecurity, time is of the essence, and the longer a threat sits within your organization, the bigger the impact it will have on your organization at the end of the day. Just a few statistics that I wanted to share with you all is that, the FBI had recently released their 2022 congressional report on business email compromise. And of the last 5 years, business email compromise has been one of the top leading attack vectors over the last 5 years. In the US alone, there were over 116,000 victims to business email compromise, with over $14 billion in financial loss. A lot of these attacks have started to target small and local businesses due to the fact, like Braxton mentioned, that not every organization, especially small businesses, have the budget or the people behind it to really spend on, hundreds of thousands of dollars of cybersecurity spend. And a lot of this has been opened up due to the COVID pandemic, where cyber criminals have had a new attack surface to start leveraging their attacks. A lot of these attacks have really started to focus on the people component of your organization. And so, Braxton, again, I'm going to pass it over to you, but we want to really touch on, what's to come within cybersecurity and what we're hearing from a lot of security leaders within the space as well.
Sure. Thanks, Jared. So the pattern so far has been, business email compromise, jumping into an operational procedure to play on that. These are attack vectors that kind of directly interact with your employees and your end users. So, when we think about running our business, we have to exercise risk management, right? So we have to make sure, what can we do to minimize risk so that we can, minimize impact, potential losses, things of that nature. And when we think about that, we have to think about what assets are going to be impacted. Your employees are going to be your biggest asset, right? Your most important asset. They are also inherently the riskiest asset to have, because they contain all the keys to the locks to your organization and your data and business processes and so on and so forth. Most of the attacks that we're seeing today are going to be driven by actually attacking the end user, social engineering or email one. So when we think about that, we want to put some immediate focus to hardening our end users and protecting them. So that requires a couple of things. One, which we'll touch on, would be making sure that they're properly trained in terms of cybersecurity and preparing them and protecting them, their data, your data, customers' data, but also having that culture. So a proper cybersecurity program has to have buy-in from the top brass within that organization for a couple of reasons. number one, if you are at the C-level or executive level, you're going to be the biggest target at your organization. You typically have the most access to things. You have the most sensitive data at your disposal. Maybe you have, trade secrets in your head, whatever your vertical happens to be that you could be dealing with there. Hackers and attackers are going to be looking for you and looking to, exploit you or get your data however they can. But also, we can't expect our employees to take cybersecurity seriously if we don't also participate, as business leaders. I want my leaders to also do what they're going to ask us to do, right? So if there's no buy-in from the top down, it's probably going to fail from the beginning. So when we think about, running our business and risk management, protecting the employees, getting that cybersecurity awareness out there is probably should be the focus moving forward.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I wanted to reiterate is that, Braxton had mentioned this a couple of times already, but with most of these high profile attacks that we see, it's led larger enterprises with larger IT and security budgets to develop new goals in strengthening their security posture against a lot of these cyber criminals. And again, it's really changed the mindset of a lot of these cyber attacks to really focus more heavily on small businesses due to a lot of the factors that Braxton has mentioned already. About 90% of cyber attacks in general are targeting your employees. And as we mentioned, they're one of the biggest assets to your organization, but can also be one of the biggest risks. And so one thing that's really important to be aware of is having some sort of well-rounded security awareness program for your users and for yourself. And so in order to really effectively educate your employees about cybersecurity best practices, including things like, recognizing what a social engineering attack looks like or what a phishing or smishing email looks like, it's really crucial to have some sort of well-rounded awareness program for your users to really be educated on, whether that's around compliance to address topics that are seldom to change but need to be acknowledged and documented, whether that's having some sort of phishing simulation to assess really where your users are at from an education standpoint, to ensure that they're not just clicking on random things that are coming through their inbox and can recognize phishing emails if something real were to happen. And so ongoing security education is really to help broaden and deepen your employees' understanding of cybersecurity best practices and good cyber hygiene to really harden your defensive skills against these attackers in today's day and age. Part of this is also going to be tied to, cyber insurance. A lot of cyber insurance providers in today's day and age have really adapted to, what the industry looks like now. And due to a lot of these high profile attacks, cyber insurance carriers have recently, made these questionnaires to obtain or renew your policy 2-3x, the length it was in years prior. And whether coverage has reduced and premiums have increased, we've seen a drastic change in this landscape where about 30% of policyholders have seen their rates increase or held stagnant due to a lot of the cybersecurity controls that they need to have in place. For organizations who are trying to obtain a policy in today's day and age, it's become much, much more difficult due to the controls that are needed to qualify for coverage. And so if your cybersecurity practice today is not up to snuff compared to what these providers are looking for, it's become a lot harder for an organization to even obtain a policy. And so this has really been changing over the last few years, and due to the heavy losses that a lot of these providers have experienced, these requirements have become a lot more stringent, and they've really adopted a new tactic to bring to their organizations that they're offering these policies to.
Yeah, so Jared, in my in my role, I work with clients in preparing their cybersecurity questionnaires, whether it's an application to a new provider or just renewing or what have you, and I can certainly attest to that. The questionnaires are becoming a lot more lengthy. They're becoming a lot more in depth, a lot more detailed. They're becoming a lot more strict. for a lot of the reasons you've already described. Number one, they're losing out on money because they weren't being, I'll say, careful enough about what their insurers were using in terms of security controls. But then also they discovered that companies were getting by just making sure they had a box checked, right? So like a questionnaire would say, do you have a backup solution? Yep, we sure do. But they're not, exercising any of the due diligence that that they should be doing in regards to that backup solution. So like, are they testing it, periodically? Are they verifying it? Have they done like a failover at some point? So now cyber insurance questionnaires are moving from, do you have the solution, to, great, you have the solution. Can you provide proof that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing regarding that, and showing us that you have, a more developed, more complete actual cybersecurity program in your organization. So they are also looking for now businesses moving towards an actual culture of it, having this program, because of all the reasons you got listed here. They're losing money, and obviously we all know they're there to help you, but they're also in the business to make money. So if they're not going to do that, they're going to make things more difficult for you. So as a business, having this culture, having an actual cybersecurity program, which involves technical controls, making it, kind of the lifeblood of your organization and your business, is going to become more and more important.
Yeah, and just to round that out, Braxton, I from experiences we've had just in conversations with different organizations, things could include, multi-factor authentication. Security awareness training has been one of the most crucial pieces to a lot of these cyber insurance policies that we've seen, to make sure that your users are educated on what to look for when it comes to these specific types of attacks. And just the overarching theme of today, due to the fact that a lot of these attacks are targeting your users, it's almost crucial to have some sort of security awareness training to make sure that your employees are well versed on what to look for. And so with that, I want to open it up to the Q&A portion and really see if anybody has any questions or feedback based on what Braxton and I have covered today, and really open it up to the group here.
Yeah, well, first, before we get into that, I just want to say thank you again to both Jared and Braxton. I think there was a lot of great stuff there. We do have a couple of things that have come in. I also want to remind everybody in attendance, please feel free, even while we're going through these couple of ones, to drop in a question if you have one, or maybe if one of these questions makes you think of something. You can use either the questions panel or chat. They'll both get to me one way or the other, and I'll make sure they get to Jared and Braxton here. So first off, how often should you hold cyber awareness training? Do we have any recommendations around that? And I guess whoever would like to take that, go ahead. But I know Braxton, at least, we do have, I think, a standard that we offer the people that we work with.
Yeah. So typically what we try to at least recommend, and it kind of depends based off of the needs of the business, but typically having some sort of like simulated phishing test once a month has been pretty overall effective and efficient. Having some ad hoc training where maybe it's not necessarily just having a phishing test, but something situated around security awareness in general. Perhaps the organization has a compliance need, like GLBA or something like that. Having some ad hoc training to go out. Typically, we recommend like once a quarter. Again, it depends. That's just as a baseline. Those timelines can change based off of a couple things. Whether it's maybe this particular business or organization, the employees just simply don't have enough time to spend on that type of training. So we can work within those bounds to make the training a little bit more accessible, or maybe that organization is not seeing enough of it. Maybe they're failing. They have a high failing rate on the phishing tests, and we need to start pumping in the tests more, or making them more aware. So again, it kind of depends on the needs of the business. As a baseline, testing them once a month, getting some training out there once a quarter is typically where we start.
Yeah, and I can
Awesome.
jump in here too, Chris. What Arctic Wolf has done is taken it on a more of a micro learning bite size approach where, instead of having those yearly trainings where you sit down for an hour and have to watch a training session, we've taken it down to more bite sized pieces, doing, bi-weekly sessions to really educate people, 2 to 4 minutes bi-weekly to really educate them on what to look for. Instead of having to sit down for an hour and watch a whole training session in and of itself. But like Braxton mentioned, the phishing simulations is also a really important piece to that. Understanding that you might need to test your users on how well they're versed on what to look for. So I think that's a really important piece that I want to reiterate that Braxton had mentioned as well.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you.
that's useful because it kind of breaks it down to more digestible bites. 2 to 4 minutes. Yeah, it's happening bi-weekly, but 2 to 4 minutes. That's a nice break for the employee. Maybe from their day, and brings a little bit of cybersecurity awareness to the top of mind. So there's lots of different philosophies to it. So I like to hear about that perspective too.
Thank you. We actually have a few coming in here, so I'm gonna move us on to another one. Let's see. This one probably pretty simple, but what is smishing? Just that's probably a whole webinar in itself, I guess, is what it's smishing. But very briefly, I know that cybersecurity lingo can often use these really confusing jargon words. So really quick, what's smishing?
Yeah, smishing is essentially getting a text. It's a fish on your text. You'll get on your phone, you'll get texts from quote unquote AT&T about needing to something's wrong with your account and click this link and provide your details. When you get that differentiation on anything that ends in ishing, when it comes to cybersecurity, it's just simply referring to where it's coming from, like the attack vector. So like vishing with V, Victor, is voice phishing. So someone calling in and pretending to be somebody or leaving a voicemail, what have you. So that type of social engineering attack can take many forms.
Awesome. And let's see, one that came in just a minute or so ago. Let me see. Are you seeing any requirements from insurers for third-party certification to various standards? And the person here references like CMMC, NIST, and so on. So I believe, if I'm taking this correctly, are you seeing any insurers who specifically say, we will not insure you unless you meet NIST standards?
They definitely have referenced NIST before, at least in regards to like having a risk assessment done. So they will ask you, are you having like NIST obviously has guidelines on having a risk assessment performed. That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, by the way, and their guidelines for that. They typically, I see it used as just like as an example. I mean, there are lots of different frameworks and guidelines out there. So I think it's less so, are you using a specific organization, but are you doing, are you using something that is, industry standard or, industry proven, that helps the insurance company feel that, you're taking an accurate assessment of your risk in the business.
Awesome. Thank you. And let's see, final one. But if anybody has anything else, if anything has kind of spurred a question, like I said, please feel free to drop it into the question or the chat panel, and we will make sure it gets to Jared and Braxton. But our last one, at least for now, how do you strike a balance between awareness and fear? I think if I had to read into this a bit, business owners, business executives hopefully don't want to create fearful employees, right? Who may be inactive because they're frozen, right? So what are your guys' opinions and thoughts into how you strike that balance?
Yeah, I think there's a good reason to be fearful of where cybersecurity is headed over the last few years, just for business leaders alone, due to the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty, you never know what tomorrow brings. And I think there's a good balance to have between, being fearful, but also making sure that you're taking the necessary actions to best protect your organization from, being that next, target of an attack. So taking best practices to ensure that, like we've talked about, a few times in today's session, but, educating your users on what to look for when it comes to cybersecurity, making sure you're going through best practices on, whether it's cyber insurance requirements or, locking the hatches and making sure that, your cybersecurity is up to snuff, and working with a partner like NetGain or Arctic Wolf to ensure that, even though you might have a small business, you're protecting everything to the best of your ability. So I think it comes down to a good balance of, having the right amount of fear, but making sure that you're taking the right steps to protecting your organization in and of itself.
Yeah, and Jared, I think also, if I'm thinking about, security awareness, obviously, we're humans here. We're talking about people. So like anybody, if you do something for the first time, you're going to be a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious. But the more and more you do it, the more exposed you become to it. You become, a little bit more prepared and able to, take that action or whatever is going on. So with security awareness, as a business leader, it absolutely makes sense, for us to be a little bit more cognizant. I'm not necessarily going to say be afraid of it, but to understand the actual threat of what could happen if we're hit with a particular cyber event and what that means for our business. So it's understandable for that recognition of the threat to be a little bit heightened at the top, but we definitely don't want our employees to be scared. But that's why security awareness training is important, because we can expose them more and more to these types of attacks. We can make them more aware. We can train them on what we need to do in situations like that. We can, drill our, organizational business leaders at our specific company on like our IRP, or incident response plan and process. So that they're fully aware of what steps they need to take, so that if something does happen, and really we need to treat it as when, not if, but when something does happen, we're prepared for it. So a lot of the fear comes from the not knowing. If we've never had to execute a plan before, or an IRP, or if we've never had to deal with someone clicking a phishing link before, and what steps do we need to take to remediate that, it can be inherently anxiety inducing and scary. But the more we expose our business to it, the better prepared we can be.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Well, that wraps us up for all the questions, and I think some very insightful answers. I just wanted to thank everybody again for attending today. We will be following up with an email with the recording and the slide deck, so that you can reference and share this however you would like. And we hope to see you again in another one. Thank you again, everybody, and especially thank you, Jared and Jackson.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.